Hi there, it's Paulie here. Haha, with Mr. Snoots. And Mr. Snoots' assistant, who's a horseshoe crab. So, haha, drinks. I love D6 Star Wars, the role-playing game. So, the D6 Star Wars role-playing game came out nigh 40 years ago, oh god, and it was a good and interesting system, and indeed the D6 system that is its core engine is being redesigned for re-release at the moment. You can find it on, was it BackerKit or Kickstarter? One of the two. It's coming out at the moment and great to see it back. The core engine of it is available on drive-through, D6 science fiction. But looking forward to the revised edition. So D6 Star Wars used a system of sort of dice pooling. You had skills and abilities which were expressed as a number of dice, sometimes a number of dice plus an add. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dice. You could get bonuses, so you'd have something like 5D plus 1, 5D plus 2. If the bonuses got to a plus 3, it just said, instead of doing plus 3, you're adding another dice, full dice. So what you did is you designed characters, you split up dice into different basic characteristics and spent some on skills or whatever. So you might get, I have a pilot which has a pilot skill of 5 dice. I use a blaster, 40 plus 1. I've got a spotting skill of 3 dice plus 2. I've got mechanical repair, you know, and I'm working for the rebellion, or I'm actually a TIE fighter pilot, but I'm not too happy with how this is going. Oh no, I'm a stormtrooper, but I'm having thoughts. I just you know, do I join the rebellion? I'm sick and tired of these guys. But maybe it's easier to maybe it's easier to destroy the crate dragon from within. So yeah, you know, you could play Star Wars Adventures. There was another side to this game which wasn't as well pushed as it should have been, and it was called Star Warriors. Star Warriors was the fighter combat and small ship combat game that came out from West End Games, which was paired with the Star Wars D6 game, and it was not necessary to play the game, but the great thing about the Star Wars role-playing game that I loved was that small ship combats and so on were as much a part of the game as personal combats were in other games. It was the first one that really brought that in. It's a big part of it because it's a big part of Star Wars. So going out there and having dogfights was a thing you could do. And what Star Warriors did was it put that into slightly more detail if you wanted to have better dogfights as part of your role-playing game. It stood up as its own board game, but it was also designed to be an additional layer to the role-playing game if you wanted it. So it is a mighty unsung hero of a thing, and it deserves more love, which I'm now giving to it. As is Mr. Crab, as is Mr. Snoots. So, the game. Very hard to find now. There are board copies of it around. You can find it as a kind of as a preserved PDF. West End Games obviously lost the license to Star Wars when Lucas, you know, brought out those wonderful previews. So this is Star Wars as it was, the first magical 3 movies, and it's a good thing they didn't make any more. But the vehicles in it are obviously ones that we see in the first 3 Star Wars movies: X-Wings, TIE Fighters, the TIE Interceptors, which are the ones with the nice kind of recessed wings. There's the TIE Advanced Interceptor prototype, which is what Vader is flying in the original Star Wars. Light freighters, modified light freighters, which is the Millennium Falcon type thing where someone's actually, you know, bung some guns and shields and everything on it. Shuttles, and it does have rules in there for larger ships like the Star Destroyers and so on, because, you know, fighting them is a thing, or, you know, having them turn up at least is a thing. You're not supposed to dogfight with these things and bring them down, but they are essentially a terrain item that spreads danger around. You might want to avoid that. But Star Warriors has one of the most beautiful simple and elementary, just a genius concept for its combat system. And I've never seen an air combat game do this in the same way or as well. Attend. So it uses the same dice mechanisms as the combat game. There is a system in the game for generating your pilots. If you aren't using characters from the role-playing game, you roll for their piloting skill and you roll for their gunnery skill, because those are the requisite skills that you'll really be using. The thing is split into an advanced and basic game. Basic game first. So, counters, hex board, and information sheets for each of these ships from the universe. Now, there are a series of different maneuvers and so on that you can do. Each ship, you are told what its maximum speed normally is. It's given a throttle setting for how many hexes a turn in speed it can accelerate and decelerate. And then every maneuver that you can do in the game, there's a numerical value next to that. Two of them, in fact. One is for if you do the maneuver, and one is if you do the doubled down version of the maneuver, so it's more difficult. So obviously it has these numbers that are there. The doubled down version is a higher number. It also has the structural value of the ship and what its weapons are and anything special about it. Does it have multiple crew? Does it carry R2 units, etc.? Does it have shields? If so, how many? That kind of thing. Now, like many dogfighting games on hexes, you are given arcs of fire for the different weapons. And when you fire at someone, you can fire out to 5 hexes. Your chance of hitting depends on the type of weapon that you have. So a quad firing weapon, like the ones on an X-Wing, have a fair chance of hitting. Dual ones like the TIE Fighters 2, but the TIE Interceptor I think has got 4. So it's easier to hit with more guns a-blazing. There are these weapons are also rated for their power, which is how much damage they're going to do if they hit you, and that power diminishes over range. So if you hit someone at longer range with the blaster, you're going to do pinging damage. You want to get in close and hammer those things into them. There are also ion cannons. They ignore shields and they tend to disable systems when they hit. There are also things like proton torpedoes and so on. These simply have a set chance of hitting when you fire them. They go out to a set range, and they're incredibly easy to just dodge if you're a small ship like a fighter. So these are done largely for attacking ground points, attacking special zones that are vulnerable on Star Destroyers, this sort of thing. They are quite literally torpedoes. They're not designed for small ship versus small ship. There are your shields. Your shields will absorb some of the damage that you are struck by. As part of your movement, you can, if you've got multiple shields, you can angle the deflectors, so you can take them and you can put them on different facings of the ship. But if you've normally got 2 shields, you can put like one that's the entire front half and one that's the entire back if you're a fighter. But what you can do is angle the deflectors double front. You can put both shields at the front or at the back. So instead of absorbing 1 point from the front and back, I absorb 2 points from the front and the back. If you've got things like R2 units and so on, they can be used to do damage control in the advanced game. We'll talk about that in a second. But what's important in this is the maneuver system, and this is a work of genius. It really is. This is one of my favourite air-to-air combat games, and I'm rather obsessed by space games and air-to-air combat games. I think this one hasn't really been excelled because the temptation, my friends, it's all about the terrible temptation. Snoots agrees. Whee! Temptation. You are the one that's going to get you in trouble in this game. Your pilot has a skill at piloting, which is expressed as like I said in the role-playing game, a number of dice plus some adds. My pilot is 5 dice plus 2 or something. Depends how you roll. When you roll up pilots, they've got them in different categories like novices, standard pilots, hot shots, aces. So when you generate, you'll generate them on a set table. So you have those dice, and when you're making a pilot skill roll, you roll those dice and total them up. If I've got 5 dice plus 1, I roll 5 dice, total up the results and add 1, and that's my final score. When the game turn begins, which in the basic game, whichever side has the pilot with the highest skill wins the initiative, they then pick a vehicle that will move. Now, there is some things with tailing, and I really like this. Allow me to use small cuddly toys to demonstrate. If you are on someone's tail, what happens is, when it's your turn to move, you may decide to pass it to the person that you are tailing. They then have to do their move, and then you will do your move next. Or you can decide that you will take your move now because you've got a maneuver that's going to, get him straight on his tail closer and do more damage. This also works if you've got multiple things tailing. So if this guy's being tailed by this guy and there's another one back here tailing that one, good. If the initiative system says this guy's move, he says I'm tailing it onto him, all right, he's allowed to. But when this guy goes to move, the guy that's tailing him says, wait, I am tailing him. I want to take my move before he takes his, because this guy wants to cover you, and So yeah, it works pretty simply. It's not hard to figure out. But what happens is every single maneuver has a numerical value on it depending on your ship, as I said. Look at the map, you sit there and you plan out what your ship's going to do. Obviously you want to sweep this thing boldly past everyone, zigzagging wildly and jinking when you're in someone else's field of fire, and end up on someone's tail and then hammer it home. Everything you do has a numerical value. At the end of the turn you can fire, that comes in the fire phase, but if you wish to fire during your move, you are taking a snapshot, you pay for that. It'll cost you 1 or 2 or 3 points depending on the ship. You'll pay for that, the ability to fire while you're moving. If you turn, it costs you. If you roll, rolling makes you harder to hit unless the person firing at you is also rolling and they are matching you. You can jink, which twists and turns and also uses some ECM and makes you harder to hit. You can side slip, you can Immelman, you can do a full loop because of course, it's Star Wars and everything's acting as if it's flying. You can over throttle your ship, so you can over accelerate beyond your safe acceleration levels. You can go past your listed safe maximum speed. You can do all these things. You can decelerate faster than you normally do. Each of these things will cost you some points. You can double down on any of these maneuvers, so you can over accelerate, double down. So instead of going 1 over your normal limit, you can go 2 over your normal limit. Instead of going your maximum speed, you can push it and go 1 hex over, or you can double down on that and go 2 hexes over. These will all cost you points. Instead of doing a normal turn, you can do a tighter turn, or in fact you have a set turn rating for your ship, which is the number of hexes you have to go straight before you can turn. You can shorten that, but it's doubling down on the whole thing, which will cost you more points. At the end of it, you add these points together and that gives you a difficulty number. You roll your piloting skill. If your piloting skill exceeds a difficulty number, fantastic. Your turn proceeds exactly as you planned. If, however, you fail to roll dice high enough to meet that, then there has been a failure. Every 5 points of difficulty means you roll once on one of these failure charts. If you've got any left over, less than 5, you roll on a slightly lesser difficulty chart. the maneuvers that you've been doing, the more they push the engine, the higher danger class they have. The first roll you make will be on the highest danger class of the maneuvers that you've made. So that's the other thing to take care of. Massively pushing your acceleration or massively making an incredibly tight turn will put you on the more dangerous chart because you're stressing the structure of the ship. But you roll on these things to see what disasters happen. Now, they can be quite simple, like a result, particularly on the lesser mishap chart. It might just say you get a negative on your next turn's pilot rolls and a negative on any rolls you have to make during this turn, such as shooting, combat repairs, these sorts of things. But the other things that can happen is you can lose some of the maneuvers that you plotted, and instead you're forced to go a certain number of hexes straight. You can lose your most difficult maneuver. So what was the one you paid the most for? Oh, the hyper-acceleration. That doesn't happen. What? You blew it. Or you can stress the vehicle and you can do damage to your top speed, your acceleration, damage the actual physical structure of the ship, take hit points off the vessel. You can also damage guns and shields, and all your systems are quite vulnerable to harm by this overstressing. What's quite likely is you can sit there and say, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, all right, so I'm going to massively overturn, and then I'm going to zoom this way, and then I'm going to do an Immelman, and now one is side, and then I'm going to, I can hyper-concentrate, I pay to hyper-concentrate my fire, pinpoint fire, so I'm going to pour that in there, and, I don't want to be shot from behind, so I'm going to double the deflectors at the rear as I go in, and what's highly likely to happen is you'll say, okay, the thing that I had planned the most was my super tight turn, and I don't make it, so instead I go forward to, and then I do that other turn that I'd planned. Zip. So it's like, you didn't quite make the turn and zigzag out of it, and now you're in a position where he can fire at you. So if you keep your plans within the acceptable bounds of your pilot's skill, you should be fine. But if you pushes it too far, you gets a hiding, and the temptation is always there just to do way more than you should, but if I do this, and if I do a barrel roll, then he'll get a -2 if he snaps a shot at me as he goes past. But if I do this and jink, then I'll get even more of a thing. But it's all massively adding to your own problems. And particularly if you do it with a damaged ship, you might actually shut down your engines or crash. So you make your own trouble, and you're better off keeping to the simplest possible plans and saving the fancy flying for if you're really in trouble. So just that is such a genius little system to have done. Yes, it does require you to roll on a chart, but those charts, which are the heart and core of this, it's such a good system. Figure out what you want to do, and the sky's the limit. You can plan any damn fool thing you want, but the crazier it is, the more likely it is to fail and either damage your ship, or you're going to strip off some of those maneuvers that you've made, and you're going to end up way out of the position you thought. Where you wanted to go is not necessarily going to be where you ended up going. I love it. What a great system. Damage is simply expressed as points coming off the structure of the ship. When it gets to 0, boom! Now, in the advanced game of this, they bring up the ability, instead of just having the hexes where you have to always face one face of the hex, you can also go down spines. So it goes from a 6 possible facing system to a 12 possible facing system, because you can travel down hex spines. And obviously there are fire arcs for units that are facing down spines. It brings in, there is a slightly more nuanced set of maneuver numbers. If you wish to use them, you don't have to use all of these skills at all. It does bring in repair. If you have multiple crew members on a ship, because you can only do one thing a turn, But if you've got someone that isn't firing or whatever, then they can attempt to do damage control on a ship. If you have an R2 unit, it can attempt to do damage control to some systems. There is also a thing that comes in called auxiliary power. Auxiliary power can be used to replace damage that would have normally happened to things like your ship's shields. It comes off auxiliary power instead. Or you can use the auxiliary power to do things. You can reinforce shields temporarily to absorb extra damage. You can use them for an extra power boost. You can do all these sorts of things for them. So it is a very useful resource to shuffle around, but not too much. It's not too much of an ask to just keep track of the fact that your X-Wing has 4 points of auxiliary power or whatever. Great. And the fact that you can turn up the power R2, or you can tell, quick, lock that stabilizer down. It's just a little dice roll, see if the R2 can help you. The other thing it brings in is force powers. You can have some characters who have an actual skill in force, and other people just get force points. It does give you in some of the scenarios Vader and Luke as he was in the first sort of 3 films at different stages. So it says, in the Star Wars universe, no one can have power higher than Luke and Vader. These were the guys who were the highest at this thing. But below that, the sky's the limit. There are 2 things that you can do. There are force points that you can spend. A lot of people get force points. The force is strong with this one. You can spend those for things to add to any dice roll that you want, or subtract from any dice roll that you want. So if someone fires at you, you can use this to make yourself a more difficult target for the turn. Good. I'm burning my force point. I'm adding 5 to the difficulty to do any shot against me during a turn. Or you can use it to re-roll any dice you want. So, I missed him. But I'm using the force, so I'm going to basically give it another shot. And you can use it to, obviously that can influence other dice rolls. Oh, you overturned this whole thing like a complete imbecile and you just blew up. No, I'm going to re-roll that one. So you can use this as your get out of jail free card. Those who have an honest to God force skill, there are force skills that you can use. And those can be things like making yourself more accurate, making yourself harder to hit. You can interfere with other pilots that are nearby and increase the difficulty of maneuvers they're doing, and so on. So you can sort of screw up people. It's an interesting thing. It makes them quite valuable characters. Does it make you a super fighter pilot? Well, I mean, it's useful, but you know what? You almost, if you've got someone who can do that, you almost don't want them tangling. You kind of want them back behind the guys that are doing the fighting, where they can reach out and screw other people up. Maybe your best use for them is preserving them so they can do that, rather than just getting a couple of extra rolls on shooting. Maybe they're better if they can screw up other pilots. And pilots have a resistance to this, so obviously if 2 guys with force powers are going at it, they kind of start kind of cancelling each other out. So yeah, interesting stuff. Brings it in nicely, fantastic. There are rules in there for flying down the trench, firing at big gun turrets, blowing up shields, attacking Star Destroyers, what damage you can do, etc. Star Destroyers are often almost like a piece of terrain that you put on the board. It's got how they turn. They're quite lovely. They're huge and ponderous, but they spread an area around them where if you come too close, you have a chance of taking damage because they have stuff going off, firing at you, but of course they won't do it if their own fighters are in the area. There's rules in there for bombing. There's rules in there for doing torpedo attacks, ground attacks. There are rules for gaining experience from the pilots. There are rules there for modifying your ships to make them better. We have run campaigns of this and had the time of our lives. We have also rolled this, obviously, into Star Wars D6 campaigns. So back in the days, there was a great comic series done by Dark Horse, which was Rogue Squadron, and this was Luke's Rogue Squadron and the adventures of them after the whole Battle of Yavin and after the whole initial 3 movies. So it was kind of like combination sleuth and adventuring, but also dogfighting game. So yeah, we managed to enrich a game of D6 Star Wars by bringing in a kind of more exciting, more nuanced dogfighting system, since we had guys who were a fighter squadron. So it's a great game on its own, and it's a great enhancement for the D6 game. Now, a thing that I always thought was really fun and funny about this was the fact that X-Wings versus TIE Fighters, it's Hellcats versus Zeros. Is exactly what it is, or Corsairs versus Zeros. The TIE Fighters, they are not particularly fast. They are very flimsy, but they turn on a dime. And oddly enough, the way the standard fight thing turns out, you could, when you looked at it, there was usually enough of a point left over to do a roll on them, just because. So TIE Fighters tend to attack by going by doing the roll, because it only cost me 1 point to roll on a TIE Fighter. That's not going to really increase my difficulty, so they'll always roll. But X-Wings, they turn not good. They go like a bat out of hell, and they are built by Grumman Ironworks. They are tough as nails because they've got shields and auxiliary power and everything, and pretty hefty firepower from the front. So yeah, Hellcats versus Zeros. One's the solidly built powerhouse, and one's the fragile thing designed for turning. So yeah, so there was a great World War II system, which is why I think this basic idea of pick your manoeuvres and roll against the difficulty you've chosen and whatever, I think that could really be rolled over into a World War II sort of thing. You could see from this how you could port this over to virtually any kind of science fiction setting you like. Obviously the details on the fighters and things they've got in here were well thought out and well done, because they gave that flavour of like the very manoeuvrable, very fragile TIE Fighters and these, you know, powerhouses going through. But you've got your A-Wings and your B-Wings and your Q-Wings and your Y-Wings and your Z-Wings and your any other kind of wing with a letter attached, and they all do cool stuff. But we did an adaptation for this where we turned it into Babylon 5, you know, it's you can do it. So a nice game. This is a lost gem of aerial and space gaming. Look, it's lost because the license was jerked from these guys by Lucasfilm, who indeed is another sort of jerk. When they were essentially West End Games went down in flames when all of their Star Wars licenses were pulled from them. The D6 Star Wars system was an amazing system. Take a look. It is preserved online. All of the adventures are preserved, scanned, free online. So it's an incredible wealth of adventuring material. So much imagination and love went into this. So well worth looking at. But the hidden side to that game was Star Warriors, an absolute gem of a combat game for fighter versus fighter. Take a look at it if you can find it online. It's probably preserved in the same places as all of the Star Wars D6 stuff. I'll try and find a link to put it below, but if you ever see the actual board game come up, like Noble Knights or on eBay, well worth getting hold of a copy, because, like I said, it's the best Starfighter versus Starfighter game I've seen, and a pretty good World War II combat sim, I have to say. A really good Zero versus Hellcat game. In our normal tradition, I've been playing this recently, Mr. Snoots versus me, and a little asshole kicks my ass every time somehow. I always make the roll, and I always fail the roll. He always make it. So yeah, I agree. Anyway, go and take a look at it if you can find it. One of the great gems of our hobby, and I would love to see that kind of idea. Not only this skill system brought forward to, you know, other air games and space games in the future, but proper expansion of some games to have like an additional layer of like the war game added to the role-playing game if people wanted. Yeah, you know, nice idea. Anyway, cheers everyone, and hopefully I see you around the games table someday. Bye. glass to the wine.